Hello. Hello. Yeah, so I'm live and I'm running a bit late. I said that this would be happening around 5 or 6, so got things out of the way. So let's get the live session out the way. It's good to see everyone. And, well, not that I can actually see you, but okay, so hopefully everybody's weekend went well, and we can get into the discussion. So I suppose I'll sit here and begin and wait for people to check in and then chime in with questions. Um, so first order, hi Leia. Yeah, so first order of business, I think like the topic I want to begin with in terms of the charged environment right now of political um, activity is the discussion of political independence. So, right now, prominently, honestly, since Americans' conception, there have been party systems within America. It's been very rare across American history for any group of people not to actively identify with any given party. But I think now we can see in retrospects that no one honestly gets it right. No one, whether they be a liberal or a Republican, gets it right because the party based metrics are centered around human value. And though that's a wonderful thing to have your values being represented within the governmental structure and setting, the problem is values oftentimes miss the whole multitude and nefarious aspects of reality. So just because you value something does not mean that that value stands as a centering force in terms of the complete totality of the facts and the necessary aspects to consider in terms of making decisions that are the best towards equilibration for the state. And equilibration is just trying to create a landscape in which everything is possible for flourishing so long as individuals can make the appropriate decisions. It's not saying that there should be anything of a utopia in the world or that there can be anything like heaven, but certainly that we should try our best to get it to where if we could make the playing field level, if we could make everything equal in terms of opportunity, that there should be nothing given a person's innate qualities, things that they can't choose and decide about themselves, things that they inherently come with, to be hindrance in terms of their capacities and abilities to pursue meaningful anything in reality, that they're the innate embodied anthropomorphic values that we have as people to find meaningful relationships and to take and have careers and to be assimilated in communities and to maximize our autonomy should not be infringed upon in any way. But with the current party system, what we do is take and find a corpus and a host of values that are something that we don and we champion. And we use these things as the arbitrary force to see legislations, policies, and different directives made in society. And I think we can see that this we have a history, or the history shows that this is largely becoming ineffective for the mere fact that so many different things can hide in values. Because anything can assume the makeup and the dress of something that you value. For example, any politician can say that they're of this belief system, but there's no real way for you to corroborate that. but they can dress themselves up in the robe and the garb of values, shared values, and use those things as political elements to get themselves places. And this is just nefarious. It's had its poor expressions and has led to just denigration and corruption and many apparatus and effects within society and governmental structures. I think it's time where we start being different from the old age and start bringing in something of a new age where we are independence. Independence being that the things such as values are measured in respects to things such as rationality and are measured in respects to things such as empirical metrics, are measured in respects to such phenomenon as history, and are cemented with some just basic things that we know given the advances in science and given the wisdom we have gained from history in terms of, hey, how should it be that we really run societies and what should we try to do and institute? I think that given the question of compared to what, at what cost, and at whose expense, um, given what evidence, given these things rather than whose party do they belong to, who was their campaign manager, what city are they from, what community, and things like this. Certainly, you would want to use your values and the immediate factors of the things that constitute your personal interests as things to make decisions about political figures and necessarily what we should do, but that's just not effective. It's really not effective in producing consistent progress. Consistent progress that can keep everybody wanting to play the game. It's a shame that, for whatever reason, we say equality is something we want, but there is no real equality for ideology. There's no equality for personality of differing temperaments. There's no equality for beliefs. We don't seem to have a space where we can truly be have the right kind of equality where we say no matter what somebody truly thinks or believes, there's a space for them to act in society in such a manner so they choose to be an active good natured, for whatever that is, participating member, that they can have a space to, at the very least, carve out whatever life they choose for themselves. And I think that the part of the problem is just there's no real corpus of that structured because there is just too much party allegiance. You try to have a conversation with anybody about something that's rather salient in terms of the hitherto future we have given our history about things that are important in this country, and you can't find it that anybody really wants to give any kind of opinion or vantage point on it that's not colored by either their conservatism, their egalitarianism, their feminism, their whatever ism. Something else is sticky and cementing itself to the issue rather than the issue itself. If we could face these problems and if we could face where we were as a country without having to sort of pander and placate, I guess, to the ascriptions and census of our shared party values and our affiliations and loyalties to certain bodies and organizations of interest, At a certain point, you have to stop being a scientist and start thinking of yourself as an American. At a certain point, you have to stop being, if you want something to go good for people, you have to stop being an atheist and start thinking as an American. At a certain point in time, you have to stop being the feminist and start saying, well, what is it as an American? I'm not saying patriotism or statism is necessarily a thing, because those are ideologies in themselves. The question is there real humanism, I guess? And can humanism be the undercurrent of things? Can we start valuing people in this country for what they are and acknowledge that they too, for whatever reason, just no matter what they believe, have a right to certain things. They just have a right to certain things, even if we don't necessarily agree. We don't necessarily have to agree with the people we meet on the street. We don't necessarily have to believe the same things that they do. And they can very much have things that just rub us and irk us the wrong way. But there is something to say about trying to approach things in terms of equilibration. And I don't think that we will get anywhere in terms of trying to create equilibrated states if we stay so true to parties and the things of that nature. And it's why I'm a rational independent, or at least what I say, at least that's what I call myself, a rational independent. I don't want to identify with any one party, because I don't think that that leads me to make proper analyses and decisions about things. I want to just look at what's really going on and what do facts and statistics really support and what makes the most sense given what we are as human beings and what we say our goals are. And I think it's one of the few ways that we could actually combat the problem of lobbyism. A rather unique solution to lobbyism is saying that, hey, there is no necessary center and body of power or distribution and moving of people, their money, and their interest to any one party or candidate affiliated with such party. There's nothing necessarily for you to grab onto other than the current of reasoning for the people, reasoning in the name of the people, reasoning for the interests of the American. Can we use reason? Can we use logic? Even our hearts and our sentiments when it's appropriate and when it's necessary to be a better something for tomorrow. So that's just, I guess that's where I'll start the conversation and saying, yeah, rational independence. That's something I'm going with. And I see people are now checking in, and glad to have you. Second go at this. Hope everybody's having a good Sunday evening. And if anybody wants to roll in with questions, feel free. Um, okay, so now I think like that's enough on that. I just really wanted to get that out of the way. Now is to morality. Yay. Now it's to morality and the sense of the question of the basis of natural morality. Is it a thing? What's the best way to go about accepting yourself? Oh, okay. What's the best way to go about accepting oneself? Oh, all right. Accepting oneself. Well, I guess let's start with the problems, or what are some of the inevitable pitfalls in accepting oneself. You have a set of innate values somewhere in you, and they're things that are local to your temperament, and they're things that aren't so local to your temperament but are just basically embedded in you given what you are as an individual. These things are going to want to drive you and steer you some way in the environment. But you also have the body you come with, the appearance you have the collection of judgments from the environment that you're a part of, and and the communities that you're a part of, and these drives in respects to these forces are going to conflict. They're going to conflict. And so accepting oneself has to do with something about mediating the ground between this conflict of interest in terms of who I am as the individual and who I am as the social creature and the cultural creature. Part of a lot of accepting oneself is a medium and a didact, but it's a medium. It's a speaking between, what do people expect from me and what do I necessarily want. So the first place for somebody starting about how to accept themselves is to say, what is it that I am? What am I? That if that sounds like a strange question, but treat yourself like a piece of home appliance for a second. Just be somewhat objective in terms of what am I? And it's to do that exercise and to be that way, you've got to want to be honest. You got to want to be you got to want to be deathly honest with yourself. If you're lazy, hell, I'm lazy. If you're hardworking, hell, I'm hardworking. If you're this, if you're that, whatever, in terms of an amalgamation of traits that you can come up with that just constitutes the general picture of you. Work out the clearest and the most defined one you can and say, that's what I am. That's what I tend to be. Outside of, you can start with the general things like I'm a human being, I'm black, I'm this, I'm that, I'm saying this from my perspective, and then move down. But it's like you're trying to figure out what exactly it is that you're presenting to yourself and to the world every day. Just the things that can be accounted for. And some of these things are going to be superficial. You say what I am, and then you say who am I? And the who you are is going to somewhat take in, map over with the things about what you are. And the who you are things are going to say, what is it that you're choosing? You figure out what you are, what you value, what you're choosing, and look at how those things interact with one another, and then say, given the dynamics of these things, where am I finding myself in my appreciation? Because the feeling of acceptance a lot of times is really self-appreciation. You don't necessarily have to accept. I think a lot of times when people say they accept themselves, they think to mean that they like themselves. And you don't necessarily have to like yourself. You don't have to like everything about you. No, I don't think any person is going to like everything about themselves. But there's a way in which you can live to where you're taking and paying attention to what you value. You're taking and being true to what you are, and you're making choices that align with all of these things, and they're going on in such a way that you're successful enough to appreciate just who and what you are. I mean, there's a space and a place for you. There's a place you should go in terms of your values. There's goals that you should make up for yourself just because of your values and what you are. And the more you strive to accomplish these goals and these things, the more you move into these places, the more you take and find communities of people that are like you. If you have a what and you have some values, you can find a meetup group and find people that are somewhat like you, so that yeah, you'll have to well, hold on, but you need to compromise at some point. Well, yeah, you'll find people somewhat like you. And yeah, it is a game of compromising because nobody's perfect. So that's what I mean. You won't completely like yourself. You can't like yourself. There's a compromise in this. Like, I think when we're born and we're children and people are paying us a lot of attention. We think we're the greatest things in the world, but reality shows us slowly with time that we're not the greatest things in the world. And it's somewhat of acceptance is where when we're asking the question of acceptance, it's at this space where we're completely disillusioned with the previous self-image the self-image that was helped made for us by coming into the world and being a child and things and receiving a lot of attention. We're at bottom with that self-image, or we're somewhat deluded by that model. You have to accept that that model is not true. I mean, like when you take and reconcile yourself, or um con- just confirm that I'm going to be as honest as I can be with myself, you're compromising there. That you're not going to have an image that's completely good or completely bad. I mean, you're a human being, and at some point in time, you have to realize that you have these modes and capacities for beneficence as well as malevolence. And when you want to accept yourself, it's coming to terms with that. You're looking at the good and you're looking at the bad, and you're saying, this is the palette of me. And you have to get a little creative in terms of what exactly does that mean for who? What does that exactly mean for the who, and moving through space and trying to just equilibrate this thing about these are people's expectations. This is what I am and who I want to be. How do I work it out so that those things are something that I can live with? Because honestly, if they're things that you can live with in terms of feedback from the environment, they're things that other people can typically live with as well. Insofar as this, like, I'm a highly disagreeable person. Anybody who knows me really well knows that. I mean, I'm kind, but I'm disagreeable. I'll tell you how I don't agree with you in a second. But people don't like argumentative people. They just really don't like argumentative people, like, in the slightest, unless they like to argue. But I'm not going to change anything about the fact that I'm disagreeable. I mean, I really am not. But I definitely know that there's a space and a place for it. And there's reasons I'm a mathematician and a scientist, because I don't have to be nice to people necessarily in math and science. If it's wrong and it doesn't make sense, it's wrong and it doesn't make sense. And if an idea is stupid, I can just say it's stupid, and I don't have to I don't have to be a certain way. But with other people, I am compromising in a sense to where I ask, just what is it that I want? Who is it in terms of my goal? Do I want to have these sort of intermediate short-term conflicts that always prevent me from getting somewhere, or even having just a decent relationship sometimes, because I mean, like, that can hurt, being highly disagreeable to that aim and to that end. And I just mediate, because I know most people aren't going to deal with it, and I know this is what I am, and this is who, and so the who I am has to calibrate between this what, being highly disagreeable, and this who, in terms of what I value and what I want, the goals. It's just calibrating it, and the compromise is just really in the what. Have I done a video in ENTJs? No, I haven't done a video in ENTJs, but the NTs. Okay, so this is what I can ask you guys. So the way I've been doing the 16 type series, so hopefully that answered the question about accepting yourself before I move on to that one. So hopefully to accept yourself, you have to be very clear in defining, what it is you exactly are, what it is you value, and what is it that the world you're in, however that shapes up, values. And you got to mediate between the two. And accepting yourself is just watching yourself take and mediate between the space of the known and the unknown, because you build a sort of self-competence. Like, you got to trust in yourself and an appreciation for yourself, because you're not perfect, but you can basically figure it out. You're never going to be perfect, and you're not completely good. There's plenty of days I'm not a very nice person and I'm an awful person. But even in those days where I don't feel too great and I don't really want to be nice to anybody, I can have a fairly productive day. There's just something about me mediating these things and watching myself overcome and pull through that just helps me appreciate, well, this is what I am, and this is what I can do, and this is who I want to be. So I'm me. And that's how I sort through the thing. And honestly, for people who are really emotional, acting helps influence your emotions. you may not feel a certain way at first, but if you act in accordance to what it is that is exactly the meaningful, equilibrated capacity that you want, you will over time feel it. And that's the that's the behavioral science truth. So take that for what it's worth. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna have to check the question. I'm not sure if you ever heard of the term thought terminating cliche, but what are your thoughts on it? Okay, so thought terminating cliche. So what do people use cliches for? What is this? People have cliches for the same reasons they have ideologies. Is because it's thinking is daunting. Honestly, thinking's daunting and it's frightening because when you think about something, you have to start in a place of where you don't know something. The unknown is really troubling for most people. It's really troubling for most people because I mean, like you have to think about just our Pleistocene existence. There was a time where being involved in the unknown. Well, you're welcome. It's true. Thinking is daunting sometimes. See, but being thrown in the unknown doesn't feel so good because you can die. And I mean, just when you're not sure about what's going on, even within the space of your head, it tends to activate the panic network in the brain. We don't do, well, certain personalities for the most part, and even highly open people. You can get me to a certain degree in space of something like, I'm not the best relational person. You can take me somewhere unknown in a relational setting, and I can get kind of panicky. I mean, I can let things happen, but I'm pretty nervous. I don't know what's going on. And for a lot of people that don't practice thinking about things regularly, that's what cliches and ideologies spell away for them. They don't have to think. The thought terminating cliche is a tool and an item to resolve this necessary, daunting, and frightening, panicking capacity of just stepping out and really thinking on a subject matter. Because imagine what you would find if you really thought about how you feel about something, or you really thought about what somebody actually thinks about you. That's what's really, most people don't know what other people think about them, because if you really figured it out, I mean, you might not be friends with that person still. If you could think about just the personal relationships you have, I mean, families aren't perfect. And if you knew really what your cousin or your uncle actually thought about you, one, you don't know if he's a creep or something like that if you're a woman or whatever. Like, you just don't know. And so the cliches and the thought terminating cliches and the ideologies spare us from these things. Because the truth ain't pretty all the time. And people, for whatever people think that others aren't capable of, we're actually pretty good about figuring out what the heck we're up to so long as we pay attention and listen. And we're actually pretty good about figuring out what other people are up to so long as we pay attention and listen. But the thought terminating cliches make it so that we can calm the thing down and keep from going there, because one, we don't want to panic, and two, we don't always like what we find. Thoughts on okay, let me get to the ENTJ. Let me get to the ENTJ's thing. Okay, so this is what I want to ask you guys. So the way I've been doing the 16 types series is that I was starting with NFs, then I was going to SJs, then I was going to SPs, then I was going to NTs. But I made the INTJ video, and I really feel like things are incongruent. So, should I go to NTs next? And if I go to NTs next, because I'm thinking about it, I didn't want to seem biased when I did this. I was like, you know what? If I do the NTs last, I won't seem very biased. But if I got an inkling to do the NTs next, and yeah, you should yeah, you should okay, so I'll do NTs next. That'll be next. And for you, I'll come out with the ENTJs, and then I'll go to ENTPs, and then I'll finish with INTPs. So NTs are next in the 16 type series. Yeah, okay. So thoughts on archetypes in the collective unconscious. Alright, so I like to spell out for people what the collective unconscious is. I think that's where I'll start first. Because it's like I think for most people, when they hear it, they think, oh, that's complete voodoo, magic, wuju kind of stuff. Pseudoscientific is a label you hear put on Jung's things all the time. And yeah, Jung was definitely an agnostic and a mystic, but his theorization for the collective unconscious is about why do people think, or why can things think? That's really what he's trying to answer. Because you can think of the collective unconscious as this. You can go to any culture, any culture, and they will have items within their culture that are similar to items within other cultures. There has to be, and the capacity for language is a very good example of this, because the brain comes with the capacity to speak every kind of phoneme of every single language. Hi, what do you mean by sociohierarchy, or what are your metrics for? Okay, I'll get to that. Okay, I'll finish with the collective unconscious, then I'll move to archetype. Every brain starts with the phonemes of every type of language on the planet. But people, over time in their culture, recede and lose the phonemes and the neural pathways that can communicate them until they get to the language that they speak specifically. Well, Jung was curious to know what exactly is the hardware that makes it such that there is a corpus of generation and thought and ideation for people. People do not come up with different ideas from one another all too regularly or all that much. Specifically within the realms of morality and culture, there's too much similarity across cultures. There's too much similarity across religion. There's too much similarity for all of it to be disparate and there to be no collective mooring agency for the thought life and the ideation of people. And then Jung started to realize, well, because he was a Darwinist, he said, well, because for example, if you look at wolves in almost any cod, and anything that travels in packs, I promise you, they have things for conflict resolution and mediation. They have behaviors for cooperation. They have behaviors for reciprocity. They are empathic to a certain variety. They do what we do to a lesser degree, but they do it nonetheless. And then so Jung is saying that these continual reiterative motifs, if you will, that show up from culture to culture, where is it nested in the whole cognitive landscape? And where he's saying that these things are nested are in what we consider the collective unconscious. And very really, we've seen with recent neuroscientific findings in terms of cognitive science. So the lobster experiment. I don't know if anybody's heard me talk about the lobster experiment, but lobsters fight over rocks. Well, male lobsters fight over rocks and positioning on rocks, because if you get on top of a very good rock, you can catch a flow and a current, and you can eat more, and then you eat more, and the females, and you're more dominant, and the females will come to you, and they like you. So rock lobster is a legit thing, and so lobsters fight over their positioning within given hierarchies of dominance, like people do to some extent. And so if a lobster loses his fight, he scuttles off into a little cave and won't come out. He gets small and depressed. Lobsters legitimately get depressed. They don't like to lose. And depression, in some ways, that's why depression is linked to panic, because you panic when you lose in a certain way, or you panic when you're losing things. It's like a depressed person's always in a state of they're losing something. So the lobster's panicking, and he goes into his little lobster cove, and you can't get him to come out. He's not interested in anything. But what researchers can do is give him antidepressants or dopamine increasing agencies, and he becomes a happy little ready to fight lobster again. And every time he loses, if you give him these antidepressants, he's ready to come back and fight again. The point of this is that people are very, very similar. And the same reward network we have is analogous, not completely the same, but very analogous to the one that a lobster has. And so Jung is saying that these pathways for behaviors, these innate patternizations of organizing in the brain in terms of you act out like rituals. So you think about your day and what you do. If you look at, like, for example, if you look at what you do when you're about to eat, or what you do, or what a addict does when they're about to shoot up some drugs, or what a couple does before they're about to have sex, they're similar. And the reason that they're similar is because they're rituals based on the same network, in terms of, when they, like, an addict is very careful in laying out their instruments. You get your food ready, and you're really delighted, and your mouth starts salivating for you, and you get these eyes that are very narrowed in their focus, and trying to achieve a goal, trying to move yourself towards something. You have these set of behaviors, or really these set of responses. I say behaviors, and Jung, because Jung calls them rituals, but they're these set of innate responses for any time you're going out and over achieving reward, or moving yourself towards reward, goal seeking. And Jung would call this an archetype. He would call all these innate organizational things archetypal expressions. And the reason Jung noticed that they're in people and cultures is because if you look at a fairy tale, it's like you would look at one of the drives, and one of the drives wrote a story with another drive. And what I mean is, if you took Panic, and you took Play, and you took the reward seeking network, and you sat them down, and you got them to write a story with people in it, or with animals that can talk, or whatever, this would be its description, or this would be its representation. And then from those reiterative descriptions and representations, we get things like ideals and morals, for the mere fact that we don't want to die, and we have a goal of climbing up dominance hierarchies. So that's how you get the myth and the mythos. And so that's what Jung means by archetypes. So hopefully that answers what archetypes and the collective unconscious are in a neurobiological sense. Okay, let me look at the questions. Hi, what do you mean by social hierarchy, or what are your metrics for it? There are no lobsters, emojis, and yes, question answer. Thanks. You're welcome. Okay, social hierarchies. Just that people always organize themselves. You can stick 10 people in a room, and over time they're gonna organize themselves. Like, I know that those shows like The Real World and like Survivor and things aren't real shows. They're scripted, but they're supposed to demonstrate something like this. Well, think about this. If you did it in real life, if you got a whole bunch of people and stuck them in a woods, stuck them in some like secluded area together, and they had to live together, they are going to start rank ordering themselves. It's this compulsion we have as people to just start rank ordering. This guy, because we're utilitarian in a lot of ways, not in the sense of we're looking for the greatest good. That would be like NFs. Well, that would be like extroverted feelers. But we're utilitarian in the sense that we divide up the world a lot of times in terms of barriers and tools. And so we don't say it, but people definitely look at other people in a certain way like tools. And that's why, a good idea is to make yourself useful, because people like it when you're useful. They really like it because that's how they do it. So what they start doing is saying, well, what is it that we want, or what we value, and how are the people in the environment a tool for achieving that thing that we want and we value? And the person that represents it the most, we're going to put them at the top, and the person that represents it the least, we're going to basically ignore them so far and so much as to however least they represent it determines how much we're going to ignore them. If they kind of represent it a little, don't represent it a little, then they can just get the newspaper or something. We relegate in that way. We either exalt or we relegate, and it's just a compulsion. Like, it's a real compulsion. I mean, patterns of recreation or reorganizing hierarchies. Are there patterns? Oh, hell yeah. So that's one thing that's what's your son's? I have no idea. So patterns of recreation or recognizing of hierarchies. Oh, hell yeah, that's a definite thing. So, like, okay, so what is a genius? And I know this is gonna seem kind of offshoot, but I promise you'll see what I mean about it. Oh, zodiac. Well, I was born May 17th, so I don't really know what that means, but you can tell me. Okay, so patterns of recreation or reorganizing of hierarchies. I'm gonna get to this. So, what is a genius? Yeah, I'm that. Okay, so what is a genius, right? You can think of a genius in a number of it's an unusual phenomenon, right? Yeah, but it's like, okay, what's so unusual about the phenomenon? It's that they bring something into existence. They bear something into existence. And what is it that they're exactly bearing into existence? What is it that they're exactly bringing forth? And I would like to take Newton as an example. Before Newton, there was the field of science, but there was no field of physics. There was nothing like physics because there was no calculus or anything like that, right? But the minute Newton makes calculus, bam, whole new field emerges and whole new dominance hierarchy, right? So and why do we tell stories about heroes? Why do we have the hero myth? Because the hero myth usually goes like this: world's corrupted, fallen, patriarchies all to hell and damn, the world's taken over by some malevolent evil force. A hero is born of some certain variety or quality. He takes and beats malevolent force, dies, and is reborn as something that's capable of dismantling previous hierarchies and bringing something else into order. He's something that can mediate between the unknown and the known. And so, yeah, you can definitely create hierarchies. I think recreate and reorganize dominance hierarchies. I think people who are highly creative are specifically in the business of doing so. I swear, because you look at a creative person, right? What are they always doing? They're making up a new game. Like, in some way. They're not maybe literally, but they're making up a new way. They're making up a new dance, something new to look at. And then they have all these people that are going to start copying them. And they have all these people that are going to start tweaking and systematizing and organizing what they've done. Or that are hierarchies are that reorganized due to realization. Well, yeah, I think it's due to realization, but you have to honestly ask, what does it take to realize something? Because it takes, so when you look at basically how people sort the world, oh, sorry, hierarchies. I get what you're saying. But you look at how people sort out and realize things about the world, they have to kind of guess in a lot of sense because their perception sucks. If you just want me to be crass and frank about it, the human perception sucks. So we need something like memory to be reordered so that we can kind of figure out what's next. And that's what our imagination is. A lot of times we realize things in an imaginative space. You can get people to notice things in the moment, but ground-shaking realizations are either brought to us by serendipity or imagination. And I think that that's what the business of creativity is to reshape and reorganize hierarchies. That's why people freaking hate it. Why do people get outraged about new art? I swear, because it means a changing of hierarchies, and people hate that. They hate that. They really hate that. The whole new sorting process, they hate it. And there is really practical ways of reorganizing a dominance hierarchy that doesn't have to do with this whole mythological viewpoint or this genius viewpoint. Well, thank you. In just the sense that dominant hierarchies are constructed Am I a spiritual person? I'll answer that next. Unpredicted realizations that create a hierarchy that no one predicted. Oh hell yeah, there is definitely like the oil and gold are great examples because we didn't know oil existed, but the minute somebody found some oil, and the minute somebody realized it was useful for it, so Rockefeller is a good example. Nobody gave a crap about kerosene. The minute people started giving a crap about kerosene, he's suddenly at the top of a dominance hierarchy that, like, out of nowhere. Luck plays into it. Like, luck definitely plays into it. But you have the reason why you can take and reorganize and create hierarchies is because hierarchies are made for a multitude of reasons. So you can have hierarchies predicated on wealth. You can have hierarchies predicated on appearance. You can have hierarchies predicated on competence. You can have hierarchies predicated on a number of things. But the thing about creativity is it seems to be the trait that can just like get somewhere, anywhere in any hierarchy and mess it up so that a new one can emerge. I promise you. That's one way I look at it. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, let's see. The possibility of a summarized hierarchy. No, cause there's too many needs and too many differing abilities amongst people, I think, for there to be a single hierarchy. Oh yeah, okay, so there's a hierarchy of culture. That's the closest thing you'll get to a summarized hierarchy. That's the closest thing. There's going to be one person in culture that everybody just says that's the person. That's the person. So culture is the closest thing to, if you're put on top of your culture, you're on top of the summarized hierarchy. Okay. Now what was I looking at? Oh, are you a spiritual person? Like, depends on what you mean by that. Yeah, kinda, not, kinda. In this way, like, I care about meaning. I care a lot about meaning. In no shirt, no, I'm not going to take off my shirt. Oh, in short. In short, was that supposed to be in short? Nah, yeah, I think, like, okay, yes or no questions is, like, asking an INT pest yes or no questions, like, are you religious? Well, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like, I'm sorry, I would try to get to yes or no, like, I'm trying, like, like in the literal, like, traditional view, no, I'm not at all. My own little game, yes, I have one that I play. So that's the best way I can answer that in terms of the traditional classic. No, nobody would from a traditional or classical standpoint consider me spiritual or anything like that. But from my vantage point, yes, because I mean it's like gets to all these questions about, well, what do you mean by this and what do you mean by that? So yes, no. Do you meditate? Yes, I do. That's an easy one. Because I kind of need to. Just in the sense that it's really easy for me not to, do metrics change over time for measuring genius? Well, okay. But do I meditate? Yes, I meditate. I kind of need to because I can be a bit all over the place with ideas, and it's something I do just briefly in the morning to get myself out of this reverie of a million and one ideas flying in infinitely diverging directions. You should do a video on meditation. Okay. Do metrics change over time for genius? Lamo, I'm an INFJ, so I asked the spiritual question to everyone. I like to see how the question is interpreted and answered. All right. So I'm gonna go with the G. I'm gonna with breathing. Yes, with breathe. Like, okay, hold on. Yes, and meditation rocks. It does. It's good. Okay. So do metrics change over time for measuring genius, or what would be considered a genius? I think yeah, it does. So because there's been different definitions given all the time given history, and the yeah, I expect you to be a J. I expect you to be J. The yeah, that's funny. The word has changed. The word has changed, and the yeah, the genius. I'm gonna get to those things. So the word has changed over time. The word definitely has changed over time. Genius in terms of it. It started as the idea for the better. That'll be your judgment, but I'm gonna just run through this. It started as the idea of a guardian spirit in the Greek tradition, and everybody was born with it. And men were born with the genius. Women were born with the Juno. Then, when the Christianization of the Greek and the Roman Empire happened, it got down to guardian angels. The idea was just transmogrified into guardian angels. Everybody had one. And the gods, in a sense, or you had at times great figures like Socrates or Plato, and they would say, so even the idea of genius changed in Greek history. Everybody had one, but some people's geniuses were better than others to account for differences in people's abilities, because your genius was your guardian spirit, the thing that gave you voice and character, because human beings to the Greeks were hermaphrodites, and they were all the same at one point in time, and then they split and became male and female, and then they were given geniuses to differentiate themselves between the temperaments, or at least between abilities, because then all the different bile, like black bile and all the different flows became an explanation for temperament, such as caloric and melancholic and things like that. But when they saw individuals that just completely differed from others, they would explain it as, well, that person's genius is different or better. And like the idea of genius is going, just because of its Western roots and traditions, always is going to be something about what somebody's able to do, because that's just its original conception. It's like, what you can look at genius through its history as an idea and see it as just, if somebody does something good, or somebody does something that culture really admires, what should we call them? What should we call them? Because that's what it became in term after the Enlightenment. Because the Enlightenment, something obviously very interesting happened. The deregulation of Christian underpinnings within a society happened, and so ideas became secularized. And when the idea of genius became secularized, it stopped being every individual had one. It started being a way and a name, and the Romantics are really responsible for this. So back up before the Enlightenment. So prior to the Enlightenment, there was the Renaissance, and then the Romantic period. And in the Renaissance, that's in the Renaissance and the Romantic period, that's when the idea of genius was changed. It stopped being from everybody having one to certain people being born with it, like a guardian spirit, something that made them different. Like they could see. You hear people talking about the sublime, or the being enraptured by a muse or something like that. It became an explanation, still a quasi-supernatural explanation, for the magnificent capacities for somebody like a Leonardo da Vinci or a Michelangelo. Then you have the Romantics, and they really favored certain figures, like certain artistic figures, and then they just started saying that geniuses were individuals, and they were individuals of a certain kind and caliber, and really the thing is profundancy. And then you get the secularization of the idea of genius, and then it becomes just an individual is born that way. And then, well, they don't really know if an individual is born that way or not. They just know that there's exceptional individuals. Then you get Francis Galton, and then he starts looking for this trait of eminence, and then you start getting geniuses to a specific individual, and they're born that way. And then you get Watson and Crick, and then you get that anybody can be trained to be a genius, but that's the idea of genius. Is there an overall summary that is accumulated over time? Is there an overall summary that is accumulated over time to better measure traits of genius? No, because we don't know what the thing is. Like, we really don't. You can't get anybody to agree on what a genius is, because, especially not in this day and age with the egalitarian political age, because if people are all essentially the same, then then you can't really have a genius by definition, because a genius by definition is different. So closest measurement up to this day. Well, for a lot of people, the proxy is IQ, but that's poor. And I've given videos, because now you can look in the dictionary and you can find that a genius is defined as somebody with an IQ over 140, and that was due to Stanford Binet IQ examination, or when they made the scale for IQ, which I don't agree. That's not a genius, but that's the thing that you'll find in the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, at least in the 1989 edition. I don't know if it's there now, but no, we really don't, because we don't know what it is. You can't measure what you don't know. Okay. Hold on. With breathing, yeah, I meditate breathing. What's your favorite book? A favorite book. Man. There's not really a. There's a lot. I'm addicted to reading. But one I really like, I can say my favorite author. Man, I can't. I like Dostoevsky a lot. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I like Dostoevsky a lot. And the work of literature that really changed me, that I've read more than once, well, two, by Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment and the Brothers Karamazov. I really like Dostoevsky, so you could say those are close to my favorites. I also like this talk about creativity and imagination. I think creativity is rooted in inspiration. Creativity is definitely rooted in inspiration, because imagination is a part of memory. Would you say the idea of genius is dependent upon culture, or changes place to place, time to time? So yeah, Brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment. Those are the best. Those are the best ones. Those are the things I can close to say are my favorites. So yes, a community. Sorry, I was on. Yeah, but the thing about the idea of genius is it's a Western idea, so it'll change in the West. But like, if you go to Africa and you start talking to people about a genius, they'll be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" They won't know, because it honestly takes the advent of certain ideas to get the idea of a genius, because you need the idea of a self first. And for a long time in history, there was no such thing as an individual. That's the idea of an individual. Well, there was the idea of an individual, but there wasn't this Western idea of an individual. And there wasn't this idea of somebody being, it's a very Western thing. Though you have in other cultures things like shamans are genius, or is the same, is like analogous to a genius in other cultures. Or you have people like witch doctors. It's like not the same idea, but it's pretty similar. Something that differs an individual in such a way that they have these profound abilities to do or to know something. And the Western conception of it is a genius, but it could change, given greater extents out into Western history, but I don't really see how it's going to change that much without science influencing it, because God knows science is just so freaking interested in it. What are your thoughts on our society's relationship with AI? Poor. Our society's relationship with artificial intelligence is poor because one, man, we're either okay. So I was reading The Soul of Man Under Socialism again this morning. So I read it this morning. It's a good little short philosophical essay by Oscar Wilde. And the thing that Oscar Wilde is talking about is how socialism will create the true individual. But in his conception of socialism creating the true individual, he's saying what's necessary is for all menial labor to be given to automated machines. And so this is the first idea about a socialistic utopia with AI being the brunt work for people so that they can pursue more meaningful and interesting work. And so that's one idea, that's one relationship people have to artificial intelligence. The other relationship people have to artificial intelligence is the engineering and scientific relationship, where we want to use them to figure out the things that we can't, because computational power is a premium, but we need something greater than computational power because we're getting fairly stuck with our ideas. And there's reasons for that. Like, I think that there's reasons for that have nothing necessarily to do with, I think has more to do with academia and the structures of academia more so than in graduate schools than people themselves. Because you get a collection of not everybody in science is autistic, but you get a collection of people who are prone to think in just really robust analytical ways and overly represented in working memory and or in a good population of them in terms of the dominant figures being autistic. You're going to get stuck because at some point you need some pseudoscience, some speculation, some like imagination that reconceives just and is absurd. You need absurdity at some point. And science bent to just get rid of all absurdity and irrationality in the world is honestly going to cause it to eat its own self. Science may die because of itself, and it's god dang scientism. I hate it. Anyways, okay. What I was saying is this. So that's the other reason why people want to use AI, because they want them to they want them to progress they want them to help us progress our knowledge. Then the other relationship people have with AI is business people and insurance companies, because AI is not as costly as people. Like, you can break a robot and you don't really have to do much to repair it. You break a person, you have to pay some legal ramifications. So, and then you have the working class person's attitude to AI that is going to take all of our jobs. And in some ways, they have a right to be afraid, because it's true. It will take certain jobs. So those are all the relationships, but it summarizes to poor, because we don't know what the heck we're dealing with. Like, just to be frank, we don't. And it's not moving as fast as people would have thought it were. Oh, and then there's the military relationship. Like, the military has a strong investment in the development of artificial intelligence. Go figure, right? But sorry, it's like, but yeah, that's what I would say is the country's relation, at least the Western frontier's relationship to artificial intelligence, and I would honestly categorize it as poor, due to the fact that we're ignorant, and most of our conceptions of it come from either science fiction or our immediate experiences and realizations with it now that we've been able to develop it, but we don't have a long enough history, and we don't know a dang thing about moral structure and fuzzy logic in the brain. Like, we don't know if we really want to make them think and things like that in terms of like how a human being can think, because that's a funny question too. You have to ask, what exactly do you mean by intelligence? Because human beings, there's more than one way to think, and there's ways that you can honestly get a few programs together to think differently than pure binary, but that's not like a human being at all, but it's very interesting. And so thought's a funny phenomenon. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't understand it, but it's like, so there's so much uncertainty that people are either overly optimistic or completely terrified or ambivalent because they're ignorant and all of those positions are poor because none of them are equilibrated. So that would be my take on it. Let's see. Do you think we will ever unite as a globe? Like no nations, borders, or prejudice, just humans here on the earth, global gov. Okay, so like I am going to say no. No, I don't. And I really don't want that either. Because I like differences in people. I like differences in people for the mere fact that differences make the world an interesting place. And it keeps any kind of really like, okay, so I got this fear, and I don't know if it's nested in me. And I've always had this fear. Like, I've always had this fear since I can remember. I remember the first time. So the first time I saw, when I was a kid, I was watching PBS, and I saw a dramatization of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. And I remember being so deathly afraid of the fact that somebody like Mark Antony could get up in front of a whole multitude of people and speak to them and influence them to do a mass kind of activity that was not well founded and that was predicated on revenge and things like that. Now, certainly the guys that killed Caesar were not good guys, but man, I just don't ever like the fact that, you know, if people all tend to think the same and we all come together and agree, it stops no one person from just infiltrating every, like, if you think about this, like, okay, let's say we could get together, let's say we all could get together and we all agreed to be one nation and things like that, and there was no conflict or anything like that. I think, like, I'll say this first, I think that we can certainly have a world where we accept one another for what we are and have equilibrated states without us being all one globe and one nation. Like, we can all be a fraternity of humanity without all being like the same. Like, I don't like that idea, because, like, think about this, like, if you could get enough people just to all come together, right? You have something like a really sticky meme, any kind of idea that's sticky and can be spreading in its capacity. It hits one person, right? Then it's gonna automatically hit another person, right? Then it's gonna automatically hit another person, right? And then it's going to be the thing that is running in every person's mind. And it's gonna be something like a Twilight Zone, like a House of Mirrors effect. And it's just really bizarre, because I suppose this, like, one thing I'm worried about is that people, whenever you get them to be collective, they don't tend to generate their own ideas anymore. They don't really see the need to, unless they're staunchly disagreeable, or highly open. Like, those are about the only two ways. It's like, there's not a lot of those people in the world, and that's why there's good for there to be other innate differences in people that make it so that we take and argue with one another. I mean, I would like for us to argue a bit more. I wish we could argue insofar as in a way that we don't berate one another and we don't become malicious and nefarious in our intentions and things like that, and that we can mediate our resentment and our jealousy a bit more. Those emotions as people. I think if we could do those things, man, we would be fine. We would all fall into complacency and a gross amalgamation, singular thought. No delineation from the model of thinking. We all have to agree, we literally need to disagree. Yeah, I mean, like, I think we need to disagree to some extent. Good. Is AI progressing too quickly? Can our education systems at its current state provide students with the problem-solving skills to solve all that are to come with AI? Short answer, hell no. Like, because of this, like, alright, so some of the problems that are coming with AI are things such as, okay, so I don't want to be this guy, but I gotta be this guy, because we have to have a talk in terms of this. Enough are generally really abstract and intuitive learning than product describing these phenomena. 40 gram. Okay, yeah. Okay, so anyways, like the AI thing, because some of the problems with AI are gonna come like this. What's morally and ethically correct for for artificial intelligence to do? I mean, that's, good luck getting anybody to agree upon that. And good luck getting anybody to be okay with somebody else's subjective interpretation of that, and then licensing that out into the world and having it act on the world in the name of some cause or some issue. Like, I mean, like that's a really hard thing, and I don't know if schools are necessarily are going to be able to do anything about trying to remediate that problem. I also know too that something about IQ, just for the mere fact that, yeah, artificial intelligence is a really tricky and complicated issue insofar as this, that the algorithms and the mathematics and the game theory networks and all kinds of other interesting things that call together to make this phenomenon a thing are not, like, I don't think IQ is everything. I'll just say that. But honestly, if you're not, what I do think is that they definitely test for your ability to manipulate abstractions. And if you're not mathematically or scientifically inclined, it's going to be really tough to deal with artificial intelligence as any greater of a capacity than to treat them like other people. And I don't think that treating artificial intelligence like other people is going to do anything about solving the issues that they might pose. Okay. It's like our biology, lol. We need genetic and all kinds of diversity. Yeah, man, like, and that's what I was saying before. We should agree, but we should agree while being different. Like, we need to learn how to cooperate and work together while being different. That should be the 21st century task, and the 22nd and the 23rd century task as well, because, like, it's gonna take, I think it's gonna take a long time for us to be able to do that, because for the mere fact that people are animated for a multitude of reasons that antedate their existence by way of evolutionary history, and many of those traits and factors that animate their existence are far more moving and indelible than anybody first thought. I feel like kids aren't developing the critical thinking skills to support the solving of these problems. Kids aren't creative anymore. They're manufactured, in a sense, not to think for self. Well, yeah, cooperation is better than agreeing. I don't think we necessarily need to agree. We need to learn how to freaking work together. Well, yeah, well, kids weren't really creative to begin. Most kids. So it's like this. So it depends on what you mean by creative. So, well, schools. Okay, so I guess it's like this. Well, you have to. So if you mean to change the paradigm in schools, then you have to change the model of schools. Because, yeah, certainly it's going to take critical thinking and for us to be far more creative. No, I don't, because I don't know what those are, so I doubt I have them. It's going to take a whole lot of creativity for us to be able to deal with the novel problems that we're facing within the 21st and the upcoming 22nd century. But you're going to need to change schools, because schools, for the mere fact, like, how do you evaluate creativity? That's a very hard thing. Like, you can't evaluate what's not been codified and organized for evaluative appraisal, because can you appraise really what you don't know anything about? Because that's what creativity does. It brings things from the unknown into the known. And I mean, I just watch how people react to novelty. Most people don't like it. So, like, for a real reason, it's really hard to get creativity into a system. It's really hard. and for you to, and for us to be able to promote critical thinking, and critical thinking is one thing, but creative thought's another thing. Like, I think, yeah, definitely. So kids should take critical thinking in school. That's a definite immediate change that we could do. That could be something that's required. And to take a logic class, I think that that's something that could also be required. But you have to ask this. You have to ask this question about the student in the current educational system. I don't see that a lack of subjects being taught is the problem with most people's thinking. I see that most people are not motivated to embark on certain intellectual tasks and to deal with certain items. They're just not motivated at all. And I don't know how you make them motivated, but I know certainly that the way that the current education system is set up, that it's not good at facilitating that even in the slightest. Because a lot of facilitating the motivation for creativity has to deal with exploration and play. And schools aren't set up for people to just play with things and to be autonomous and explore and explorative with information. Honestly, because you can't really evaluate that. I mean, if you wanna be sure about what you're getting, you want to make it so that you have something definite that you can see, that you can say, yes they know or no they don't know. Because schools really want to do a yes or no question. Do they know this or do they not know this? Like it's a known thought now to be creative. You need to know a bit about something, but creativity doesn't necessarily guarantee the fact. Being creative doesn't necessarily guarantee the fact that you know something. Could guarantee other factors that you can't necessarily account for in the goal of making sure that somebody has ingested the current understanding and these domains of knowledge. So you'd have to change schools. You definitely have to change schools. Yeah, my teachers hated me too. And hell, I'm in college right now, and like a lot of my teachers still hate me. You know, that's the tough bricks for being creative. Like swear, like most like people like creative. The world likes creative people when they make something that they want. That's it. That's about the only time. If you don't make anything, like if you're highly creative, you spend most of your time making things like, I'm a very creative person. I have ideas all the time. A lot of my ideas aren't good, and a lot of them are dangerous. Like, a lot of them are just freaking dangerous. Like, if some people knew what I was really up to, they'd be like, you need to put that person in an asylum. It's like, yeah, because sometimes, like Dostoevsky, for example. I mean, like, if Dostoevsky went around saying, like, hey, I'm really going to analyze murder, given the time period, people would just be like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, they would have really thought that, and that's what creative people do. They totally push the perspective on things and try out different things. Like, well, is murder really a bad thing? We're going to explore that in this novel, Crime and Punishment. And, like, that's a lot of what being creative is. Pushing, like, people don't like that, and it's dangerous, and it's really ridiculously hard to evaluate. And about the only evaluation for it is cultural approval. That's about it. It's utility and cultural approval. Okay. Yeah, we NTs, a minority in SJ, majority world. I think it's for the better, though. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely... Well, because you have to think of the world like this, as an ecology, and you need... not to compare people like, not to compare people like, well, I am. So... You need some people, like, okay, so one thing that people condemn other people about is, like, being sheeple. Look, you need some people to be sheeple. Like, you do. Because, look, if we're playing this game, so, alright, I'm gonna sound really crazy for saying this. But if you want culture, right, and you want to continue this game of, rapid distribution, production, and activity and advances, you need stability and infrastructure. How do you get mass stability and infrastructure? You only do that if you have... No, we can't. Because you honestly can't do that if you don't have people that are dutiful
and interested in taking and organizing things. And you need a whole heck of a lot of organization first to get creativity, because you need the capacity to just muse. Like, if you don't have a world where people can just sit around and muse about, like, God knows what, then, I mean, you don't get any insights. Like, there's a reason that there was, like, little to no creativity before agriculture. Little to no. Because at that point in time, NTs, NS, SJs, and SPs all had to do the same thing. We all had to do the same thing. Basically keep from dying. And, like, you want to take it, you want to make the world in such a way, or at least nature wants to make the world in such a way that you can have a world where there can be people to make the stability and the cohesion, while the creative people come up with new ways to make it so that the less creative people can have an easier life in some vantage points. So you need, and you need people like NFs to be there to figure out how you get all these masses of people to cooperate with one another. You know, it's like, it's a good thing that we're the minority and not the majority, because if we're the majority, NFs can be dutiful, but they're really not. They're really not. NTs can be dutiful, but we're really not. That's not our MO. And we certainly can organize things, but man, leave it to the SJs. Like, leave it to the SJs, and that's why there's more of them. Because you look at any kind of ecology in nature, there's more herbivores and things, because if there's not the herbivores, you need a surplus of herbivores, you need a little bit of the carnivores at the top to keep the thing in balance. Like, it would not maintain itself. Like, if you had more lions and you had you need 10 times the amount of zebras as you have as lions. Like, that's a real thing. Or the thing completely collapses. It just completely collapses. Because if you look at personalities insofar as, like, shorthands for how to maneuver in the world, they definitely have an evolutionary history to themselves, and some people play different games than others. And NTs play a certain game, and NFs play certain games. NTs and NFs play high-risk, high-reward games. They play high-risk, high-reward games. The whole world cannot play high-risk, high-reward games, or the whole thing would be in chaos. Yeah, keep the boat afloat. That's what SJs are here for. Okay, now. Headshot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. Sorry. I want to hear what he thinks NF's special traits are. What are NF special traits? NF special traits, well, what unifies NFs and NTs is imagination and creativity. One thing that I think that I'll start with what makes NFs the same with NTs, because it's special in the sense that it differentiates them from SJs. But NFs and NTs are abstracting in nature. They're highly imaginative, and they're highly creative. Now, what makes NFs really good is they're so, like, their special traits is, whoa, hold on. They're so good at relational maneuvering. Like, oh, well, two things. Like, okay. Two things. NFs, how should I phrase this? NFs can mediate like nobody's business. If you have a conflict you want to resolve, get an NF. Like, I'm telling you, get an ENFJ or somebody like that to sit there and be between the two parties. Like, they're best at it. And NFs are very good at watching emotions in the track of human motivation. NFs are really good at watching the track of human motivation and creating narratives out of them, and using those narratives as theories to take and map themselves through the environment. So, NFs can figure out what the hell a person's up to before anybody else knows what they're up to. Like, it's crazy. You put an INFP on somebody and just ask them, hey, what do you think of this person, or what are they doing? And an INFP can tell you, oh, they want this, and they want this, and they want this, and they want that. Like, I don't know any person that... I don't know people that have theory of mind as strong as NFs do. And they seem to be able to spot social trends. Not necessarily like the... They're not always concerned with... They are concerned with the substantive reality of culture and dominance hierarchies. Like, NFs can see and spot a dominance hierarchy, spot its movements, and create strands of theories and narrative about what the heck people should do given it. Like, Joan of Arc was the first person to say that the Catholic Church was corrupt. Like, she spot that stuff. Well, I mean, like, other people spotted it, but, well, no, like, honestly, to her credit, like, people weren't saying that. They were not saying that. She was like, you people are corrupt. And, I mean, it takes an enough to do that sometimes because, you know, I don't know if you've been with children, per se. I was having a conversation like this with a person earlier. But children are monsters, man. You have to teach children not to hit people, not to hit one another, not to bite one another, not to steal, not to defecate and pee wherever they feel like. Like, you have to teach people, you have to teach children these things because people have this function to them that's not so nice. Like, we definitely can be altruistic and we definitely can be egalitarian and all these and empathic and have high capacities for reciprocity. But, man, we don't necessarily like to always lend ourselves to those capacities. NFs have a greater proportion of one, or at least can see the necessity of the greater proportion of one in terms of it being a cohesive factor that, in the sense that we just don't kill one another. Like, the world would kill itself 10 times over if NFs weren't around. Like, I promise you. And we kind of need NFs to put leashes on us in terms of morality. Because I promise you, most types are not concerned with morality. They're not. Not in the way that you would think that they are. Like, SJs are concerned with security. And they will prize that, I kid you not. Like, that's why you can get governments to do really awful things. Because they will prize security over what's... And when I say morality, I mean pro-social relations in human behavior. NFs are very good about mapping and keeping track of pro-social relations and watching strands of motivation and constructing these things in lucid and coherent narratives for people to be able to watch themselves and figure out what the heck they're doing in some veins. But maybe NF should be in leadership. Oh, heck yeah. Like, you need a proportion of them in leadership. Like, heck yeah. Because you don't get people a lot of times. You should have them some. I'm not saying all of them. Not saying all NF should be in leadership. But you should have some in leadership. You do. Because you need them to be your peacekeepers. You don't always need to fight somebody. It's better to avoid fighting people. But it's better to dance. It's easier to dance with somebody than it is to fight them. Yeah, and that's like, at least that's an NF's motto in terms of social relations. They'll dance with you and like persuade you, but they don't necessarily want to fight you if they don't have to. And they're good about that. But okay, like, yeah, so that's basically what I think NF's special traits are. They're wonderful little things. Okay. What would you describe the NT special trait to be? Comprehension, strange ties between intuition and grounded reality and facts. Yeah, so NT's... No. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I would say NT's, NTs are best at abstract goal approximation. So an NT can do something like this. If you have a group of people out in like the woods or something and you have to survive for a while, what the NT will do is start to see how something's going, and they'll just abstract processes or rules. NT's special traits are the ability to explicate the rules to systems. They can manipulate and explicate the rules that govern a system. And that's why they're good at managing systems or theorizing, because they're really amazing at rule-based thinking. They can make a rule and they can see a rule. And they're good at, if they want to be, they're good at explicating or explaining the rules to somebody. That's what a theory is. It's just a large explanation of rules. Sorry, I need to blow my nose. Hold on, I'll be right back. Yeah, so sorry, but yeah, NTs and rules, man, they do it. They do it well. Because, that's useful. I mean, I really think of the personalities as all the personalities living in an ecology, a fraternity of humanity, and you need people that can sit there and figure out what the heck's going on in a broader sense. Not in terms of relational aspects, but in terms of goal-orientated metrics. Because science was something of a conception to get a handle on reality. Even, that's really what it's there for. Oh, okay. Hold on. Do you think as humans become more disconnected, less tangible traditional communities, more NTs and NFs will pop up over time? I don't know, cause that's like definitely that's definitely something up to sexual selection. And I think NTs are expensive to make. I think NTs and NFs are expensive to make. Because it's like this. When you're looking at a person, you're looking at a brain, and brains are costly. And when you're looking at a personality, you're looking at asymmetric developments in a person's neurophrenology, just the mapping of their brain, quite honestly. Because your personality, in a lot of ways, the base package of it comes down to the neurochemical washings and the expressions of the traits that constitute your neural structure, your neuronal structure. So I think like to get more NFs and NTs, one, the world's got to be richer. Like you need wealth, because you need it in such a sense, because people have to want to select for it. And so as the world becomes more wealthy, you'll see more NFs and NTs, because as we have to do less work, the work will change into things in terms of creative work and intellectual work. As labor becomes less necessary, you'll see more NTs and NFs. But it takes labor. It takes wealth. It takes wealth in the selection for NTs and NFs. Who are you more attracted to? ENTPs or ENTJs? Like, in what way attracted? Romantically, ENTJs, like, hands down. Like, I mean, I like it. I like myself an ENTJ girl every now and then. Like, I do. There is clearly a hierarchy between types, and some types are just shite, eh? Some types are necessary for different things than other types. That's how I see it. NFs serve better as advocators and revolutionaries. NFs are advocators, they're mediators, they're revolutionaries. NTs definitely can be revolutionaries. Social revolutionaries, social and cultural revolutionaries. NTs intellectual. Opinion on ESTPs. I don't know a lot. I don't know many. I mean, I honestly only know ESTPs from a very abstract way in what I read, but I haven't met one, so I can't really give an honest opinion on it. Yeah, I look up and I look around a lot, so I have trouble convincing myself of a strong relationship between cognitive function structure and the 4 letters. Well, if you want me to just be frank about MBTI, I think it's poorly put together, if you want me to just be honest. Like, I don't think that it's the best descriptive model you could come up with for personality. But, no, because the 4 letters, honestly, like, how they're meant to be used, the system's confusing. It is confusing. I'll just be honest. Like, L. Ayn Rand, cultural revolutionary. We are very capitalistic and sometimes fascist. MBTI, socionics, or both. Yeah, I would guess Ayn Rand is an INTJ. I only really know MBTI. Ayn Rand is most certainly an INTJ. At least from what I read about her, or what I read from her, only an INTJ would write this. And what Ayn Rand means by the virtue, in a messed up way, I like that MBTI is confusing. Doesn't make it that easy to explain to people, though. It's true. Like, only an INTJ would write that, because because when she's talking about the virtue, well, you know, INTJs are interesting folks. Like, if you look at Ayn Rand and you look at Friedrich Nietzsche, like Nietzsche, I think Nietzsche is the only philosopher that can tell you a majority of mankind is weak and useless, and I write specifically for the type of man that is a genius, basically, and exceptional, and that's all my work is for. Like, Nietzsche has sentences and quotes, not to say, and what I mean by it, and why I say, like, why I say that's interesting is because INTJs are fundamentally individualistic. They are fundamentally individualistic. Only INFPs and INTJs are the only ones that will create really strong individualistic philosophies, because they really champion the individual self. And when in Ayn Rand's Virtue of Selfishness is talking about rational self-interest. And if the idea of rational self-interest does not sound like a conception of an INTJ, then an ENTJ an ENTJ thinks the same thing, but it just isn't going to take the time to write it. Us INTJs gotta love us. It's true though. Like, I like listening to that philosophy. It's interesting as an extroverted feeler to me, because I'm always trying to egalitarianize everything. Like, I really am. Like, even as an individualist, I'm an INTP and I'm an individualist, but I notice, even in my individualistic nature, I egalitarianize everything. Like, like everything. And I promise you, one of the hardest temptations I have is not trying to make things easy for people. But Hegel taught me, like, you don't just make things easy for people in terms of your philosophy. You're not doing any service to them for doing that. Because it's no better than, well, Hegel has his reason. Any thoughts on Plato and his theory of forms? Yeah, I think that, well, I think Plato was onto something in terms of that there are fundamental concepts that make reality what it is that doesn't necessarily describe or embed itself within the fabric of reality itself. What he was talking about in a lot of ways are archetypes, at least I think. But I know he was talking about that in terms of the physical world. But if you look at his theories of forms, he's talking about how the brain actually comes up with perception, because we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we project the world in front of us. At least our brain projects the world out in front of us, and we have a theory of form in our mind in a certain way, because the visual landscape is a landscape of emergent patterns. It's not actually a landscape of emergent objects. Like, we don't see objects like in the way that we think that we see objects. We see patterns, and as the patterns stack and map onto one another over time, our brain constructs an object out of these base nodes and forms it already has. And that, to me, is how Plato is right about the theory of forms in a specific way. It's kind of a stretch, but I mean, I see what he's saying. I don't think he was describing reality. I think he was describing necessarily how human beings perceive reality. Your lenses are concaved. I'm sorry. Thoughts on strange relations and fundamental similar characteristics between first and third letter switch ENFP and INTP. So the letter switch really happens because of the way that you define the system. Hate to sound axiomatic in that, but it's true, because the way Jung postulated it was that you have an extroverted intuitive type, and an extroverted intuitive type's auxiliary function was an introverted one. And it was an introverted one that served to mediate basically the activity of the extroverted one in terms of its reverse and counterpart aspect. And so when Jung was talking about the extroverted intuitive type, but what Jung really meant by that was vague. But when Jung was talking about the extroverted intuitive type, he was talking about the ENFP, or what we think of now as the ENFP. Von Fritz confirmed in her conception of the auxiliary function, that you would have, if you had two extroverted feelers, because there has to be the extroverted feeler that introverted feeler. If you have two introverted feelers, there has to be the introverted feeler of the extrovert variety. There has to be the introverted feeler of the introvert variety. And so what oh, so you weren't concerned with... Yeah, because I'll talk to you about the system. But I'll talk to you about the... I was talking about the system. In the way of being and doing things, like INTPs can come closely to visually seeming childlike, like ENFPs. Yeah, there's your answer, dopamine. Because extroverted intuition... So two things. I think because two things ENFP and ENFPs and INTPs are concerned with: exploration and play. Like, INTPs like to play. I kid you not. And same thing about ENFPs. Same thing with ENTPs. Like, extroverted intuitive types like to play. Same thing with INFPs. And yeah, and their curiosity and their enthusiasm. It's exploration. Because we like to explore and we like to play, and those are things that are generally associated with children, and that has to do with extroverted intuition and the function of the reward network and the play circuit in the brain for those two types. Why do you think NI generally hard to explain to others? Now, if you want me to be honest, because most people are dumb, but if you want me to be more you want me to be more scientific in my explanation or theoretical, I'll say this: for the pure fact of this, that intuition in general crosses too many strange boundaries. Yeah, because intuition in a sense is non-local. That's the first thing. Because extroverted sensors and introverted sensors are necessarily bound into their local environment. About the only way you can get an extroverted introverted sensor to think about something outside of their immediate known circumstance is to have them watch the news or to read something. But they don't just muse about these things, and they're not prone to the phenomenon of transient hypofrontality, which is a downregulation of the brain. They're not very introspective. They're not very imaginative. They don't daydream, and they forget their dreams often. They're just a different kind of individual than any kind of intuitive types in general. And then when you get to introverted intuition is archetypally generative. It generates archetypes. And it tends to be a summating process of taking a multitude of factors and boiling it down to a single point or realization or head. Because it's concerned with the theoretical meaning of something. Like the theoretical meaning of something. And oftentimes introverted intuitive types try to just present the intuitive meaning to things to people. But most people cannot look at a concept and then undress it and unpack and follow its trail of reasoning. Because introverted intuition doesn't present its trail of reasoning to the individual. Because a lot of the introverted intuitive insights come from reveries and sudden epiphanies. And so the eureka moment is an encapsulated moment, but it presents for the introverted intuitive type either a very strong concept that will lead to the broader idea or the complete idea itself. And that doesn't lead itself to easy explanation. Most people don't have the imagination to track it if it doesn't. Hold on, I have to blow my nose one more time. And to add to that, because there's a funny thing about imagination. There's a funny thing about imagination. Not all imagination is equal. Because imagination is a restructuring of memory. It's a restructuring and reordering of memory. So if your memories themselves tend to be local and rather preventive in of themselves, your imagination isn't going to be something all that extravagant. And you can see that. Like, there's a truth in all people are creative, but not all creativity is equal. In the sense that not everybody's geared towards the phenomena of abstraction. Not nearly in the same way that intuitive types are. And that's why intuition will fall deaf on most people. It really will fall deaf on most people. Or you have to work really hard to get them to see. That's why Jesus spoke in parables. Because he knew. Like, you have to tell them stories. Something that's really local that they can get a hold on. Because they really won't if I just tell you outright what I mean, and that's why Plato used stories too, because if I tell you outright what I mean, you won't understand me. That's just the reality. Most people are dumb in scientific. Well, I meant the non. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. Any thoughts on inferior function and development? Actually, I have a whole video on inferior functions and developing inferior functions. I think this. So it was asked if I was spiritual before. I think like in this way I am. So I see the inferior function as the gatekeeper or the door to your unconscious in a certain way. Well, not in a certain way. I specifically see it like that. Like that's the legitimately how I view it, and that's by way of Beebe and Dr. Beebe and von Fritz's work. And what they show is that typically your extroverted I was about to say extroverted feeling because I'm thinking of my inferior function, but your inferior function leads itself to be the place of generative capacities and novelty that you can handle. Like it's something that's rather new but unfamiliar at the same time. Because even novelty-seeking types have a certain type of every person, because you can look at a human being being comprised of two types of systems in the brain. Roughly, this is a rough description. Systems to deal with the known and systems to deal with the unknown. And your inferior function has something to do with that part of you that deals with the unknown. It's usually the unknown items of self and the way that you're viewing and seeing the world. So your inferior function is a place where certain emotions and attitudes can get stored. And so far as you think about it, your cognitive functions as a collection and a vat of different types of energies and emotions, resentment and envy are things that definitely can be linked to cognitive functions, and they're the inferior functions specifically, and also estrangeness and thrownness. Your cognitive function is probably something that's going to make you feel so damn weird and inadequate. It is whenever you encounter it in the world for the first few times. Now, and however you feel about that strangeness, that novelty, and that inadequacy is going to determine necessarily what you associate with it. But I know for myself, oftentimes they're either naive feelings of positivity and acceptance, or like you're either naive with it seems like you're either naive about your inferior function, or you're harsh about it. So you don't really know how to remediate the extremities of it. So with developing it, I say you need to commune with it. That's something I get as an expression from, I don't really know where I get that expression, but I know this, that it's like talking to it. So an easy way is just to, for example, for me, hang out with extroverted feelers and deal with it. Really deal with it. Try to understand it. Just try to understand it and try to see it in yourself. A lot of times what's hard for us is to see the functions activity in ourselves. Seeing the activity in ourselves makes it so it's not so strange, and so we don't feel certain things of naivete towards it, and we don't feel envy and resentment either. Because it was one thing I had to learn about being an INTP, that I will egalitarianize the hell out of something unconsciously, like not even trying. I will make it so that I don't really like most people, but I will tolerate most people and want most people to basically get along and cooperate. Like, I don't know, and there's no reason, like there's no real rational, like it makes sense longitudinally, but it doesn't really make sense in terms of a sound argument, because it honestly is a motive that is a priori, that goes out of the room of any rational conception. So the thing with the recognizing of inferior function is just that you see it in self, and when you see it in self, it's something that will bring a great deal of positive generativity to you. It can honestly bring back the boon to the kingdom. It's a space that you go and visit to be restored as a person, to go back and overcome the world. If you're having a harsh time as an INTP, go talk to an extroverted feeler, and they'll make you feel better. They just really will. You can go out and overcome the world again. Okay, there's a lot of activity. Thoughts on extroverted judging functions, mostly extroverted feeling being action-orientated functions. Well, yeah, because so I say this about extroverted functions: they're licensing, where introverted functions are generative. So you need something to create the things, and you need something to use the things. Basically how it goes. And extroverted feeling uses feelings to act in the world. Introverted feelings are not interested in acting in the world, but extroverted feelings interested in acting in the world. And that's really how I think of them, because that's why extroverted feelers are interested in harmonizing things, and are necessarily interested in being more totalitarian than any other type. As an INTJ, SE is the last concept to me. I either remain aesthetic or overindulge in sensory pleasure. Also, my body and mind are extremely sensitive to the outside environment. Well, even as an INTP, my body is extremely sensitive to sensory experiences in the outside environment. Yes, I'm an INTJ, but I'm also a highly sensitive person. Being a highly sensitive person is a meta temperament. Does anybody want me to talk about superordinate temperaments? Does anybody want to hear me talk about superordinate temperaments? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so because MBTI is not satisfactory to me in some respects, that's really what I'm up to, like about organizing and redefining things. Like, I swear that's what I'm really up to whenever I talk about type. Because it's messy, and it's like incoherent in a lot of ways. So what do you do about things like IQ? What do you do about things like being highly creative? What do you do about things like being a highly sensitive person? What do you do about being compulsory? What do you do about being neurotic? What do you do about these things that are factors when you look at cognition, or you look at temperament? You can stack things on top of one another. The more ordinate something is, like superordinate is the highest ordinancy, means the lower it is in the pervading factors of the brain, and the less likely it is to plasticity, the less likely it is to change. So ordinancy is determined by the plasticity of something. And it also determines, inordinancy is about punitive and sovereign measures in a municipal state. So the more ordinate a trait is, the more it is going to dominate and influence the other traits. You have the fact that you're a human being at the bottom, at the floor. You have the fact that whatever sex you are, or whatever like sexual orientation you have at the lower stratum. Then you have your ordinate factors, like certain superordinate personality dimensions. Then you have your temperament, and then you have whatever else you come with. And most of those things pass temperament, in terms of your character, behavior, education, and different things like that, they're very much subjective to change. As you get lower and lower, like those things are less subjective to change. So being a highly sensitive person is a superordinate trait because it has to do with the wiring of the brain that it's like highly sensitive persons, empaths, neurotic people, creative people, they can be many different types of people. When you're looking at a certain superordinate trait, you can have a whole host of different people having the same kind of disposition. Like extroverts can be highly sensitive people, introverts can be highly sensitive people, and there's different ways you can be a highly sensitive person. And there's no good explanation for it, and it doesn't change. Like you can't get it to move, you can't get it to change very much. And these traits are the things that are probably in some ways more salient than other things when understanding and differentiating a person. It's also why I don't like that anytime somebody is articulate or good at manipulating abstractions and a whole host of other abilities, that people automatically assume that they're an NT. They could just be an NF that has a high IQ, because that's going to influence and pervade a lot of things. More things than you would be willing to, I guess, at first glance realize. And it's the same thing with being highly sensitive, because being highly sensitive legitimately influences the landscape of that individual. You can have an INTJ that's reckless. There's a lot of INTJs that are reckless in terms of their physical activity. Overactivity. But there's certain INTJs that just won't. Do you think highly sensitive people is linked to Dabrowski's overexcitabilities? Well, I'll say the connection between Dabrowski's overexcitabilities and these superordinate traits, I would say, is that they're all talking about in rare and infrequent asymmetric developments in the brain. So most people's brains develop on an even in an even landscape. That's why a lot of people are most people are similar, or people seem to be the same in a certain variety, because their neurophonology is for the most part like the same, just given a few differences in here or there. Most people are close to the mean. But some people's brains are just way non-neurotypical and are far out there. And that has a different coloration whether or not you're talking about a personality disorder, or you're talking about an overexcitability, or you're talking about one of these superordinate traits. But overexcitabilities, superordinate personalities, and personality disorders, I do consider all of them as superordinate traits. And that's, to me, their connectivity, because they're saying something about a person's neural disposition that's going to say more about how they see the world than their temperament may be able to tell you. Very really. If you meet a schizophrenic, there's a lot of people that are schizophrenic. There are. And, there are not a lot of schizophrenics in general, but there's a lot of different types of people that are schizophrenics, per se. If you listen to crazy people, because I do things like this, I'm weird like that. You just go to a place where they keep crazy people and talk to them. A schizophrenic, you got no goddamn idea what's going to come out of a schizophrenic's mouth. You really don't. And the topics that they choose to talk about, the anxieties and the panics and the fears that they actually manifest and have, differs from individual to individual. And you can see they all have different personalities. They really do all have different personalities. But they're all schizophrenic. It's why it's like that, don't ask me. But it seems to be like that. And I would say that overexcitabilities are the same. Because when you look at overexcitabilities tend to increase as IQ increases. But IQ, different personalities, then, there's nothing in terms of personality specifically that can tell you what somebody's IQ is. Just really can't. I've met some really dumb INTPs, I'll be honest. I have. Well, that's not fair. And, I'll just say this. I know that there's differences in cognitive ability, and necessarily those things differ amongst people. And overexcitabilities and their propagation definitely differs among people. And so and personalities just differ, even in that variety, even in that stratum of things. Um, is that hyperactivity? What do you mean, hyperactivity in terms of what? The highly sensitive person. Um, I'm gonna need some clarity on that question. Um, More thoughts in FE. What do you love about it? Well, Dabrowski's overexcitabilities. Well, you have several of Dabrowski's overexcitabilities. So you can be emotionally overexcitable, intellectually overexcitable, psychomotorily overexcitable, um, imaginatively overexcitable. Um, yeah, so you have, and sensual. So those are your five: sensory, psychomotor, imaginative, intellectual, and emotional. So it depends. Honestly, depends on what you're talking about. I need to dust my room like holy crap. More thoughts in FE. What do you love about it? What do I love about FE? Hold on. Yeah, I apologize as I need to dust my room because my sinuses are acting the heck up. But okay, so let's see. Oh crap, it's 2 hours. All right, well, I'm gonna answer, I guess, two more questions and then I am signing off. Okay, more thoughts on extroverted feeling. What do you love about it? General thoughts. Um, I love the humanistic quality of extroverted feeling in terms of extroverted feeling is always pro-social. I like that. I mean, it's definitely a necessary thing for anybody to cooperate because I mean, like it's just as I get older, it becomes even more and more apparent to me that people need to cooperate. Like we just need to cooperate. We don't need to agree on things, but we do need to cooperate, and very really that's something very really that extroverted feeling is adept at facilitating. And also, I love the fact that extroverted feeling is very warm in its disposition. Extroverted feelers do just make you feel like you should be there. You should be with them. Like they make you feel good. So, um, well, I really appreciate you too. So thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. FE and TI relationship. Okay. What about it? Well, I would say that the FETI axis commands this in a person for them to ask, what do I know and how do I best share it? Like that's their FETI is primarily concerned with communication. They like to it's definitely the communicative agency in the landscape of personality. Um and and it's and it's mostly responsible for debate, argumentation, and demonstration. Well, at least in this sense, like FETI is the axis that says I must demonstrate. It wants to demonstrate and convince people. So you can think it for rhetoric. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that necessarily, but yeah, it's FETI axes. Okay, I'll look one more time. Very strange question. Under what condition do you do a meetup? If it's interesting, that's not a strange question at all. Like, I'll meet up with any person if I find them interesting. Like, that's not. That's really the only criteria I have, because I'm an extroverted, intuitive type. So I'll just jump out there. In terms of the big five model, the big five, and in terms of the big five model of personality, I'm in the 98th percentile in openness to experience. So I'll basically just fly out there and do something. I'm not really, I'm not conservative at all, like in some respects. So no, I mean, like, if the person's interesting, I don't care. I'll meet them. I don't care. It's just most of the time I'm not in the same state as another person. But I mean, like, if I was in the same state as another person, I'd meet them in a second. Yeah, but what constitutes you finding them interesting? Sounds like a potentially tall order. Scratch his head. Like, yeah, so what's interesting? I know it when I see it, or I know it when I read it. Like if you're interesting, you're not cliched. That's for sure. If you're interesting, you're somewhat differentiated in terms of you're just not necessarily like other people, and you're weird to some extent. I'll just be frank, you're weird. Because I don't like boring people. In terms of choosing, volitionally choosing to spend my time with somebody, I'm not really going to want to be with somebody who's boring. Like, I can't do that. I don't like that. Oh, you don't legit have to answer. Well, I thought I did. I'll just finish, and then I'll wrap this up. But, yeah, and they have to want to like to talk about something. I mean, I can talk about a number of things. They have to want to like to talk about something. And honestly, a lot of the ways any INTJ gets me anywhere is to say a hike. Let's go on a hike. Like, INFJs and INTJs, that's how they get me. They're like, oh, let's go on a hike. And I'm like, oh, hike sounds nice. I like nature. Like, that's like, that's how they get me. But, yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, like, I'm not conservative in the slightest in that way. But, okay. All right. Your experience in Cali as an INTP. Thanks for the live stream. Oh, you're welcome. Your experience in Cali as an INTP. My experience in California as an INTP is, well, I like California than I like most places. Like, I like New York and California more than I like most places because, I mean, there's some things that are superficial here, but, I mean, I can get my hands on, like, so many books. Like, holy crap. There's so many amazing universities around here that I can just stop into, even if I'm not attending it, and bother somebody with a question. Like, you know how often I'll show up to a campus and just start talking to people randomly? Like, it's fun. And I like that it's very liberal. At the very least, that it's liberal. And I like liberality. Clashes with TI or introversion? Well, I can always ignore people. I'm very good at doing that. Well, all of America is extroverted as far as I'm concerned, and that clashes with me, period. Like, it's annoying, but, I mean, I tolerate it at this point in time. I mean, like, I know how to shut myself up in my room. But, okay, when it's necessary. Okay, well, I am very, honestly, right now, I'm now very introvertedly burnt out. I'm, very grateful for everybody tuning in and throwing out questions and things. I really appreciate this. And I am now going to take a nap. But thank you, and I'll do another live stream 2 weeks from now. And oh, you're welcome. I'll do another live stream 2 weeks from now, and yeah, this is true. I'll do another live stream 2 weeks from now, and so I'll mostly try to do these on Saturdays. I'll try to do these on Sundays because I mean, like, people probably want to go out on Saturdays or whatever. I don't ever go. Well, I can't say I don't ever go out. I do go out all the time, but whatever. Okay. Either way, do another one 2 Sundays from now, probably around 5 or 6 p.m. Thank you for your attendance, and have a good night.